Yo, what is up? Welcome to Ninja Geek Games. For those of you that know me, you'll know I'm quite partial to heavy and complex strategy games, most of them involving the odd dragon, a mage or two, as well as long drawn out hours of tactical gameplay. Well, Kingmaker only promises the latter, but does include a historical theme. Kingmaker II is a game set during War of the Roses, mid-1400s, that's now a pimped out version of its predecessor. Think of it as a more suitable heir. Here you take on the role of a leader of factions controlling nobles and their armies, where you must choose your allegiance, then change it, possibly break that alliance, and then make another. As a brief overview, you'll be manoeuvring your pieces by land, road and sea to take strategic locations throughout England and Wales in an attempt to gain prestige and capture a number of royals. So yes, the game is full of treachery, heresy and backstabbing, but it's all relative as it depends on which side you're on. So a bit of history about the game itself. Kingmaker I was published back in the 70s that simulated conflict and political struggles during the War of the Roses. I had this version of the game for a brief time but never got it to the table. The rules were bulky, the playing pieces were similar between all players, and there were some exceptions to gameplay that could have been easily resolved with board icons, but instead insisted on good memory. Therefore, I concluded that this game was built for those groups who are looking to play regularly and become seasoned veterans in the art of warfare. But the royal lineage has been succeeded with an updated version of the game boasting shiny new components, streamlined rule changes and 4 variants that can be played. This copy of the game was kindly provided by Gibson's Games, and I've only played the 2 to 5 player Kingmaker II, but the game does offer a classic version of the original game with up to 6 factions, a variant adding extra cards and events, as well as a solo challenge. So from the offset we're already looking at a lot of content, but note if you're looking at getting the game, the 6 player mode can only be played with the original classic version of the game, not the updated Kingmaker II. Write that down. In this video we'll go over the components, the game mechanics and then discuss my thoughts on Kingmaker II. The game board is a huge map of England and Wales depicting various towns, castles and strongholds, some of which are linked through roads. Interestingly, I live here, so you're ever looking to sack cities in the southwest, pop in for a cuppa. The land is split into these small areas bordered by the white lines that are then grouped into regions within the purple borders. Surrounding this mighty island is the sea that's also divided into spaces for ship movement. What I like here is that we have a grid so we can reference specific areas on the map, which I don't think the original game had, so we don't need to be experts in geography to find certain locations during play. I also like the fact that the board has areas for the various card decks, as these just look better than being sat around the edge. The crown deck are the cards that form your hand and become part of the nobles in your faction and include titles, offices and even ships. The events bring in revolts, sea storms and plague that affect each player's turn. This is the prestige track, which is like a victory point tracker, and these are other various cards that can be collected by the nobles throughout the game. Each faction has a number of noble tokens of one colour and the sigil on each is identical amongst all players. However, these all represent individual nobles during the war, so you'll know that no other faction can have the same noble active on the map. These smaller tokens are used to mark controlled locations and alliances, and you also get a stat marker to replace large numbers of armies and nobles in one area. At the start of the game, you'll need to create your faction by assigning crown cards to your nobles. To make this easier, each player gets a faction card that lists the nobles you control and their titles, offices and the lands they own. You then award these by sliding them under the noble card as you see fit. You can go top heavy, favouring one of your nobles, but this may paint a target on their back, or split them evenly and use their strengths accordingly. These cards show the strength of the army they lead, whether they own ships and control towns, have the presence of a bishop, and all are relevant to certain actions in the game, and they also show the starting locations of your noble pieces. So this is what the setup looks like, where we have a number of royal pieces belonging to York and Lancaster spread around the map. Nobles from each faction sit on their starting castles, and any towns and ships owned from assigned crown cards are marked accordingly for that faction. At the lower section of the board we have a troop strength tracker, as these may change during combat, areas to place stacked tokens for multiple units, as well as an alliance chart housing the faction markers. If any alliances occur between players, the tokens get cozy to remind everyone who has joined forces. I think the board and components are a beautiful representation of the game with a deep-rooted historical setting that includes well thought out colours for the player tokens. The detail and imagery is outstanding, but still has that vintage appearance which is quite appealing. You'll be forgiven for thinking the tokens are a little small, but as we'll see, noble pieces can be in one of a number of places in just one area on the map, so if they were any bigger it just wouldn't work, plus the board is large enough as it is. Card art is pretty nice, and once the game is set up it has great table presence, but it might take you a while to get there. As we've seen at the beginning of the game, each player receives a faction card detailing which nobles and crown cards belong to them. These need to be selected from a pretty large deck that can be time consuming, where the game includes a draft variant, but I've not tried that yet. I think you'd need to have a very good understanding of the game to ensure the factions remain balanced, and this is why I always stick to the preset build. However, once claimed, the assignment of crown cards to your nobles is like a mini game itself. It allows the beginnings of your strategy to develop and is a really enjoyable part of the game that requires decisions on the starting positions of your nobles. This means that even at the same player count you have a good deal of faction variability with each game, and I like this as there's no overpowered opening move. Cough cough, Game of Thrones, Greyjoy attack the Lannister ships, cough cough. There's also an event deck to set up that again takes time, as you have to count cards, add parliament events, remove a number of them based on player count, but don't worry, you'll get there. There are no set rounds in the game. Each turn consists of players progressing through a number of phases, and then this moves to the next faction until the game ends. Players get to move units, partake in combat, and there are conditional phases to include call for parliament and coronation of a king or two. The aim of the game is to earn prestige through claimed land and victorious battle, or be the faction to hold the last surviving royal. I can't go over every single intricacy in the game or we'll be here for hours, but in order to claim royals or earn prestige, you'll need to manoeuvre your pieces around the board. You can move nobles to any area within the region they're in, or to an area in an adjacent region. Failing that, they can use roads to move greater distances, but you are then limited to which areas you can stop off at. When in an area, if you control a fortified location, you can decide to sit tight instead and flip your noble to indicate you're hiding inside a castle or a city, and this is important for a number of reasons. Maybe you want to defend it or use the garrison's defensive bonus if attacked, but they also allow you to control parts of the map where the roads meet these fortifications. If your fortified location crosses a road, whether you have nobles present or not, you can prevent other players from passing through. Think Gandalf and Balrog. So as more and more positions are claimed, they can somewhat block long distance travel or protect other strategic locations beyond them. However, you can choose to allow passage of other factions and maybe ask a favour or two, none of them binding of course, so you also get to control particular regions on the map providing no one takes your strongholds. If you fancy a little cruise, you can always go by boat, providing you own one, and move about the sea at your leisure. These can dock at other ports, but you may be banned from entering those with areas with fortifications owned by other players unless you have enough troop strength. Each ship and fortified location does have a capacity limit, so you can't have all nobles and their armies pile in. Some of them need to be left outside. Now, as the game progresses, you'll have moved your pieces accordingly to gain fortified locations, try and take hold of royals, block port areas, or plan to attack. However, with each player's turn, event cards will be drawn. These could be peasant revolts that force certain nobles to attend particular locations on the board, and in most cases this is mandatory, meaning that hard fought after castle you took control of now becomes empty, or worse, left to a lesser noble. There could be storms at sea that force ships to dock earlier than expected, and these ruin your travel plans, or an event that sends away mercenary crown cards attached to nobles, reducing their strength. The plague card is a pain. It marks a city overcome with pustules and death and kills player pieces if they're holed up in that fortification. This means that you sometimes have a difficult decision to make when moving. Do you protect your army and possible royal pieces within a city but risk them dying of plague, or leave them in the open field ripe for attack? However, each city is named once, so when these cards are drawn you can look to see which cities will be safe in future turns, which is very important to note. If a Clamour for Parliament card is drawn, then certain players can summon Parliament. There are a few parameters for this. The faction must hold a king and then names nobles from other players to attend. These are compulsory, but players may add to the list if they want. Now, certain effects in the game, like Death of Nobles, provide office and title cards to the Chancery area. During Parliament, you then get to divvy these out to other players and your nobles if they don't have cards of this type. I really like this part of the game, but it doesn't happen often. You could look to get the better share of the spoils, beef up your allies, or ease tension between you and your enemies. These chancery cards provide control of cities and towns, so are quite sought after, and you can make quite a few friends doing this. But this game is not all about being nice, and this is where combat comes in. There are two options for combat: battles in open field if nobles are not fortified, or sieges if one faction is hiding behind their walls. It's actually quite simple. For open field battle, you just add the troop strength of all player nobles involved, which could be in the hundreds, and these are shown on the crown cards attached to the nobles. Players then get the chance to add extra crown cards to the nobles from hand, and this is a good way of surprising the attacker, because if you're able to swell those numbers, you can force them to withdraw. You then compare strength and consult an odds table, giving you the set ratio for the attacking side. Next, you draw an event card that lists one or more odds in the corner, and if the attacker odds are equal or greater than any of those shown on the card, then they win. If not, the battle was indecisive and nothing happens. Some cards indicate bad weather that postpone battle. Well, it is England. And others name specific nobles that can be killed outright, even if on the winning side. For sieges, you just compare unit strength. No odds are needed. Again, you both get to add crown cards, but the defender also gets to add defence bonuses provided by the fortified location. Event cards are still drawn that can take out named nobles or postpone victory due to bad weather, where the defending nobles then become pinned and can't move from the location until relieved. But as long as the attacker strength meets or exceeds the defenders, then it's an outright victory. Battles are quick and decisive, and if any defeated nobles survive, as the winner you have two options. You can execute them and remove the tokens from the game, or ransom them back to the other player at a cost of their titles, offices and land, which I think is very thematic. Battle is the main way to claim control over the royal pieces belonging to York or Lancaster. These then sit with your nobles, following them like sheep, and you can do two things with them. Execute them, man this game is brutal, or crown them at the end of the turn. The latter requires you to be in a city with a cathedral and have a bishop or two in your surrounding nobles. As kings or queens falls and others are crowned, you'll quickly progress through the royal line, which is one of the ways to win the game. Players always get to draw crown cards before the next faction takes their turn, so you'll likely have cards in hand to play whenever needed, and you can even trade these between your allies and nobles. What I've done here is go over the basic actions of the game, but there is a sub-layer to just moving and attacking. As mentioned, you need to decide where your nobles sit in areas, within castles and towns or out in the field. Each have their advantages, and the location of these is even more important. You'll want to block roads and control ports, so there's a highly strategic element here. You can also form alliances with a number of players, and these also have their benefits. You can make use of their fortifications, join them in battle, use their ships and trade crown cards between the factions. And the best thing about this is that you can end it at any time you wish. Taking royal pieces and crowning or executing them must be done at the right time. You can't own two royals from warring families, but you can look to eliminate ones that stand in your way. If you own the last surviving king or queen on the board, then your faction wins if you can last another full round of turns. If this route doesn't take your fancy, then prestige can win you the game. Certain cards, like those gained from winning battles, provide prestige, but they can be taken away. Likewise, owning a royal piece provides some, crowning them gives you more, but if you execute them, you lose that prestige. The game can also be won through an alliance, which I think is great, and in this way you're required to pool the prestige but do need a higher amount to reach the set target that's based on player count. Battles are pretty quick and don't always go your way even if you outnumber the enemy. Crown cards can be attached to nobles from hand, so make sure to always look at how many cards players are holding. To help track troop strength, you can record this on the board tracker and alter as necessary, but it all comes down to the event card drawn. Obviously, the greater the odds, the more likely you are to win, but don't take bad weather too lightly, as this gives other players a chance to respond. Event cards do slip in a bit of randomness. They call nobles to cities, remove mercenaries from armies, force ships to dock, and can spread the dreaded plague. However, you may be lucky and receive a noble or a free move card, and this allows you to move your noble pieces or ships an extra time during your turn. The game is very thematic. You need to be in a cathedral city to crown a king or summon nobles to parliament to award them with titles, which is good fun, but also rewarding with careful planning. As parliament can congregate a number of nobles in one area, you'd be correct in thinking you could quite easily take some of these out. But the game introduces the king's peace. That means no battles can take place for a number of turns after this action, which gives you a bit of breathing space, and this is also true for the very first round of turns during the game. As I enjoy games of similar theme and genre, it's really good to see where other area control wargames have evolved, such as Warrior Knights and Game of Thrones, for example. Each of these has snippets of play that I now see in Kingmaker. I do like the fact that no faction has a particular starting position at game setup. Most nobles come with a choice of castles to claim at the beginning of the game, and this does vary on whether you use the pre-constructed noble list or the draft variant. I enjoy games with table talk and broken promises, but none so much as discussing the ransom of a noble after capture. I'll send them back if you give me their land. If not, I'll execute them and you're left with nothing. You could easily point out that they have cards in hand that could possibly be assigned to a disgraced noble on return, and it really does feel like you're vying for power and control rather than military might. Downtime is far quicker than most other similar games, which is ideal as it just keeps the game moving. As for the rules, they're not too bad to follow, but the rulebook spans 25 pages with only a few images as examples of text. Including all the exceptions of when things occur, it can feel a bit laborious and does require a number of read-throughs to get to grips with the game. Nonetheless, Kingmaker sits high on my list of strategy war games, and I'm hopeful it comes out often. Thanks for watching. This is Ninja Geek Games. Cheers.